I was reading that well-known spiritual magazine known as the Daily Telegraph, in which the property pages had a large banner headline, and it said, "Houses for sale with mindfulness rooms for meditation." Now, I've never seen that in a property ad before. I've never seen it in the Daily Telegraph before. But it's of interest to me that in the public domain are issues like mindfulness and all that relates to it writ large across the public stage. Now, isn't that wonderful? I actually think we have a lot of gloom and doom in the world today, but we tend to put our heads down there and we miss what's actually in front of us. And what's in front of us is a spiritual renaissance, and I think it's of monumental scale. You've only got to spend 5 minutes walking around this shop to appreciate that. Mindfulness and philosophy are part of that renaissance. Imagine that you are at a party. The party banter wafts and washes around you. The conversation ebbs and flows. Then someone mentions the subject of religion. And at this stage, there's often as not, there's a kind of turn-off of attention. Some folk try to move on, others feel a bit trapped, a bit like rabbits in the headlights of a car. But nonetheless, the conversation does roll on, and it might be rather on the following lines. He says, "Do you ever go to church?" She says, "Not if I can help it." Well, maybe at Christmas. He says, "Maybe the odd wedding or funeral." And she says, "Yeah, I suppose so. Otherwise it all seems a bit," well, he says, "predictable and frankly not terribly inspiring. There are always such nice folk in the church, but I don't know, I can't put my finger on it." And she said, "Well, I don't believe in God anyway, so there's not a lot of point." He says, "Well, I don't know. What I can't get my head around is that if the Christian God is the real deal, the only okay one, and the Islamists say the same, and so do the Jews, and so does everybody else, they can't all be right, can they?" She says, "Well, no. As I said, I can't see the point of religion." He says, "Well, I'm not sure that I can't either, if I'm honest, but I still think there is something, but I don't know what to call it. But I do feel different if I am, say, looking at a beautiful sunset, or admiring a fabulous view, or maybe entering a great cathedral. Not so much religious as, but I suppose you could call it spiritual." She says, "Well, if you put it like that, I suppose so. I must admit there are times when I feel a kind of, I'm not sure how to put this really, but a oneness with nature. And when in that state, I confess I do feel a bit better disposed to people around me than I do normally." He says, "What do you mean?" She says, "I suppose I'm not so separate. There's a kind of unity, if you like. I can see how you could call that feeling spiritual in a funny kind of way. But I don't see how that fits in religion, though." And he says, "Nor do I. But it does make you wonder, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Makes you wonder." So if any of that conversation resonates with you, then it is possible this book might work for you. It's possible that it might not, but it might. My intention in writing this book is not to prove anything. I don't want to convince anybody of the rectitude of any particular path or of any particular belief system. The hope is that with the heart and the mind open, the questions will arise in the mind of the reader, questions of the type implied in the party conversation I've just read. So the book invites the reader to just see if it's possible to discern a common thread or unity across and throughout all human beings in terms of their basic composition and the wisdom traditions or civilizations that have evolved. And this is despite today's uncertain, fear-driven world. I'm sure you'll agree. We don't often live in a fractious, disjointed, dysfunctional, seemingly entrenched materialistic world today. No matter how much improved is our technological know-how, how our information-based methodology or our results-driven culture, we seem to be behaving more and more like hamsters running, the little wheels, hamsters running in a wheel in a cage, round and round and round, round and round, faster and faster and faster, but not getting anywhere. So we're caged and bound. So the thinking here was to provide something of an antidote, not by way of a quick fix, not as a glib or facile endeavour to force something because it sounds as if it ought to be like that. No, it's more about discarding from our philosophical or mental wardrobe the musty clothes of the ephemeral, the habit-driven, the pretentious and the superficial. So what happens if you do that? Nothing, really, initially. At least initially, I don't believe one wants immediately to don another set of philosophical clothing and risk returning to base. The recommendation, frankly, is just to take a step back. Watch. Notice. When the mind is quiet, notice how you feel. Just observe. Let the senses play as they will, but without interference from the mind. And in the noticing and in the observation, maybe there will be a quiet depth of awareness, well removed from the flotsam and jetsam of everyday living and the life stuff that formerly seemed all so consuming. So that's a little bit of that gives you a flavour of where the book's going. Now it's called Mindful Philosophy, Mindfulness and Philosophy. Mindfulness is essentially awareness, and it's been defined by many scholars, John Kabat-Zinn being one of them. I can't remember the precise quote, but it has to do with attention in the present moment without judgment. Nothing happens without attention, does it? You're sitting here, you're attending. There's attention. I can see it in the room. You're all looking at me. There's attention. Now, if I waffle on too much, you might think, oh, God, why doesn't he stop rabbiting on? I want to go home. So the attention starts to move. Then we've lost it, haven't we? So attention is key. Where is the attention? It's here, now, in the present moment. You don't have anything else. You only have the present moment. Nothing else is real. Only the present moment is real. What's that old quote? The past is history, the future is a mystery, but the present is a gift, which is why it is called the present. Right? So, non-judgment. It's so easy to label things, good or bad, right or wrong, black or white, short or tall, long or short, east or west, spiritual or material. There's these pairs of opposites, and we like to stick labels on things, don't we? So with mindfulness in full view, we cease to apply labels. We just observe. What are we? Good question. That's a philosopher's question. Ultimately, there's a case to be said for we are just this quiet, simple witness, witnessing all. Now, philosophy, big turn-off, isn't it? You know, people think philosophy, what do I need for philosophy? I need a great big thick book as big as I can look at the doorstop and start reading it. Well, no, you don't. Plato said philosophy starts in wonder. So the starting off point is not the big thick book. The starting off point is to go out of that door and take a look at the stars. That's the starting off point for philosophy. Wonder. So philosophy, it derives from two Greek words meaning love and wisdom. Love of wisdom. Now, what is wisdom? How do you know somebody's wise or not? Well, for me, a definition of wisdom is that knowledge which enables life to be lived more joyfully and more truthfully. That's, for me, that's what wisdom is. So somebody who has this capacity to be truthful and to live life to the full, that exudes wisdom. What does it mean to love wisdom? Love is something you commit to. Love is something that is totally devoid of any kind of criticism, if it's true love. So you love wisdom. Now, why is that relevant to mindfulness? How could it not be relevant to mindfulness? If the philosopher takes a mindful approach, he will avail himself or herself of true wisdom, of true love, of true joy. So, in a nutshell, that's why I'm calling the book Mindful Philosophy. It has to do with the great truths and depths of humanity. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I was when I was writing the book, This can be seen in all the great spiritual traditions. You might think, go on, prove it. Well, the book goes through Christianity, it goes through Sufism, it goes through Vedanta and the Hindu tradition, it goes through Taoism, it goes through Buddhism, it goes through the Gnostics, which are now in vogue, having had 1,000 years of not being in vogue. It goes through a lot of different traditions. I could just cherry pick a quote. Do you go to church and think you're going to get some of this stuff? You don't normally, or sometimes you do. Here's a quote. When you make the two one, and when you make the inner as the outer, and the outer as the inner, and the above as the below, and when you make the male and the female into a single one, then shall you enter the kingdom of heaven. Jesus Christ, to be found in the Gospel of St. Thomas. A perfect statement of what I would call non-duality. What do I mean by non-duality? There is a feeling that people use the phrase all is one, don't they? It's a sort of glib thing that you see a lot in the underground. And we need to look at what it actually means, and the book tries to close with what that actually means on a practical level. But just look at, have I got time? How are we doing? 4 brief precepts which I think are relevant to non-duality, which is what mindful philosophy is. The first precept is that there is only one ultimate reality, and you can give it a name if you want to. I call it the essence, you can call it God, or Brahman, or the Tao, or the Buddha nature, the Great Spirit, the Native American traditions. It's got many names. You can call it a name if you really want to. You don't have to call it a name at all. But the precept 1 is that there is an essence which is incapable of definition, is incapable of measurement, is incapable of any kind of analysis whatsoever. That is a first precept. The second precept is that the essence of you and me doesn't differ from that, made from that universal essence. There is no separation. Okay? So the true essence of human beings is not separate from that of what you could call the divine. Third precept is that it is the purpose of life to come to that understanding. So you didn't think you were going to come here and have somebody tell you what the purpose of life is. But the purpose of life is to come to the understanding that there is no separation between you in your essence and the essence. And that can be undertaken in the normal duties of everyday life. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to go to a monastery. You don't have to sign up to somebody's belief system. You can do it in the... you do need some guidance and help on the way, and meditation is good, but you don't have to go anywhere. Fourth precept, well, it produces unending joy, unending contentment, unending steadiness, and the capacity to help others on the way. So what's not to like, really? So those are the 4 basic precepts which I think run through mindful philosophy, that runs through what Aldous Huxley calls the perennial philosophy. It can be seen writ large across the great spiritual traditions throughout the world. Why is there a problem? Because people claim things. In their true essence, these truths are unclaimed. They belong to nobody and everybody. If we claim them for ourselves, what do? We write them down. We write a book, perish the thought. And then somebody writes a book about the book. And then somebody writes a book about the book about the book. And before you know where you are, you've got Catholicism and Orthodoxy and Presbyterianism and Methodism and all the isms and knowledges that exist. Well, I mean, you don't need it, do you? Let's go back to what the guy actually said. I just read you a quote from Jesus Christ, who I think is a mindfulness teacher par excellence. You will find other... The book is... The way it's set out is that the meat of the book is going through each of the various spiritual traditions, and I'm giving you quotes that come from teachers of those traditions. Shamanism, Native American culture, Aboriginal, there's so many things. The world is full. And wouldn't it be an odd thing if they all disagreed? But they don't disagree. They come back to the same thing. They do come back to the same thing. So I just think it's worthy of our study and our attention to just test this out, because ultimately this is practical stuff. It's not up there with the fairies. It's down to earth. Let me give you an example. You can choose to live your life in one of two ways. You can spend it in waking sleep, autopilot. You get up in the morning, you brush your teeth and have your breakfast and get in the car or get on the underground, and it's all an automatic glaze. You haven't engaged. It's autopilot. So you don't know that you're travelling in one of the world's greatest cities, London, fabulous architecture, beautiful scenery. I know there's some funny stuff too, but it's all there. You can see it, but you can't see it if you're not fully awake. So the second way you're living your life is to live it to the full. Come to your senses, come to our senses. So be really engaged with what's going on, with the people, with the atmosphere on a subtle level, and all the artifacts of living. So that's the practicality of this work. It's hugely down to earth. It's important to consider meditation and allied disciplines. So whilst it's very practical, it's very important that we have some instruction or discipline as to how to really close with the things that we are and to disassociate ourselves from the things that we are not. The philosopher's question is, who am I? What am I? The true philosopher really wants to question what really is a human being. And he does so by process of elimination. Here's a thought for you. If you want to know what you are, you can't be anything you can observe. If you can observe it, you're not it. How can the subject be the object? So, if you want to know what you are, you need to come out of the things you're not. So, there's a lot of feeling abroad in the 10 million people of London that I am a body. I am a physical body. Right? And that's it, no more. Physical body, 3 score years and 10, in a box, and that's it, job done. Well, it's not like that. If I had my hand chopped off, perish the thoughts, I would still be as much a human being without that hand as I am with it. So you can see that I am not the body, I am observing the body. So that's relatively straightforward. What about the mind? The mind is a tool. The mind, like the body, is an instrument for your use, and you can watch it work. You can watch the thoughts. You might want to change your opinions over time, and you can observe all that going on. And furthermore, you can observe emotions. Have you ever felt anger rising and you choose to not go with the anger? Who is it doing the choosing? Who is watching the thoughts? Who is it that's observing all this stuff? So you can put a line through body, you can put a line through mind, you can put a line through emotions. What about me? What about Michael? Is he real? Are we real? There's a little ego, a little egoic entity called Michael with his likes and his dislikes and his proclivities of one sort or another. Well, I don't think so. I think there is a separate egoic entity which is called the small self. Right, in the book I call it little I. Right, the small self. And that ultimately it changes. You've watched that change over the years, in my case over the decades, and you see it evolving. If I'm not the body, and if I'm not the mind, and if I'm not the emotions, and if I'm not this egoic persona, what am I? And you're not going to get an answer, because I am the silent witness. And that witness is not separate from the absolute, or the whatever you want to call it, and it is incapable of definition, cannot be defined. Modern science. Anybody here a scientist? You're all, yeah, one or two scientists, okay. Well, my understanding from reading a few of the great scientists is that there is an engagement of modern science with the spiritual tradition. I mean, I'm not a scientist, as I say, but if you have a quantum theory, under which my understanding is that matter is basically illusory, and even if you analyse it right down to the smallest particle, I think it's called an electron, isn't it? That's the only arguably piece of matter, and it's perceived from one direction, it's a wave, from another direction, it's a little entity. Excuse me. So if you apply consciousness to it, attention to it, that wave becomes an entity. Now, how does that work? I don't know how that works. I'm not clever enough. But it proves that ultimately the materialists courtesy of the scientists, have disproved their own belief system, because matter is, now we understand, an illusion. It is only energy. All right? Now, kicking and screaming, the scientific world is coming on board with what I would call the spiritual dynamic. And there was a chapter in the book which goes into a number of various things. I'm not going to. I don't understand it myself, so I can't really expect you to explain it to you. But the summary of it is: this is what the scientists say, and I'm open for you guys to put me wrong here. But this is what they say. 1, there's no such thing as matter, only energy. 2, there's no such thing as empty space. Space is neither empty nor space. It's continuously moving and all-pervading energy. 3, there's a thing called an REG machine, which the University of Princeton in America have researched, and that says that time is now understood by the scientists as an illusion. There is no such thing as time. Modern stem cell research indicates the existence of a divine presence. Observation of the smallest particles, electrons, etc., i.e. the application of consciousness by attention, is the only means by which so-called matter can be realized. Consciousness therefore pre-exists created matter. There can be no phenomenon until it is observed. That's the observer effect. This rationale is destructive of materialist philosophy, because the very thing that sustains materialism, matter, does not, in the last analysis, actually exist. And the final thing, there is in truth no separation. I am an individualized derivative of a universal consciousness. I could go on, but I'm conscious that the clock is ticking. So the book ends with a chapter on, or 2 chapters actually, on the nuts and bolts of mindfulness, of being present, of giving full attention, of various types of meditation, various types of exercises are given to experiment with. Wow is now. If you feel the wow factor, you are in the present moment. And isn't it great to have that? I mean, if you go out there and look at the stars, wow, that's the phrase that comes out. So I'm so pleased you've asked that. Well, you've made that observation, really, because it is the truth that wow is now, and the wow factor is something that we don't want to get po-faced about this, folks. It's not about academe. It's not about more degrees in the thermometer or anything like that. It's just a question of being in the moment. The question is about are all these traditions much of a muchness, or is one of them on the button, and to the extent that it's more so than the other? The observation I have is that all groups of humans have a particular way of expressing themselves, and it's good to honour the tradition from which you come, because it resonates, it resounds. So use that with which you are comfortable. I wouldn't wish to cherry pick any particular tradition. Personally, I love the Vedanta, the Veda, because I find it very succinct and very clearly expressed. That's just a personal view. And I think you'd be much better off not butterflying from flower to flower with this. Have a good look and then see what really sings to you. I mean, if you find that the words of Jesus Christ are what's important, then go with it. It's fabulous, absolutely fabulous stuff. You don't need all the soap opera business. What you do need is what he said and how he taught. The Gnostics evolved in a Christian way, but they don't do the crucifixion at all. Jesus may or may not have existed physically. He may or may not have been crucified. They weren't concerned about that. What they were concerned about was gnosis, i.e. true knowledge, i.e. meditation. So whatever is your pleasure is the answer.
I'm just going to ask, you mentioned that time doesn't exist, and you also said that nothing exists until it is observed, but observation is an event in time, surely. Can you perhaps say something about that?
The only thing that does exist is the present moment. Okay, so on that basis, the passing of the time is part of the play. You have a play. It's called creation. In India, they call it the Maya. And the play is full of beings like me and you, and shops like Watkins, and all the paraphernalia that we have. And you need time as an organising principle, as part of that play. Ultimately, Watkins is not real. The books are not real, the chairs are not real, time is not real. It's all part of the play. Observation, you say it requires a time factor to observe anything, does it though? Because I'm suggesting that observation is something that just comes out of nothing, actually. It's very instantaneous and it's very precise.
I would agree that in a sense it comes out of nothing.
Hmm.
But I still think there is a process of it coming. You call it the play, but it's a process. It's a living thing unfolds in time.
No. Okay. Well, put it like this: if you have the ultimate reality is the essence, and that the self of us is not separate from that essence, it doesn't follow that there is no reality in creation. It's just that the reality is dependent upon the divine.
Yeah,
right?
I get it, yes.
So it's not that there's no reality, it's that the reality is, in a way, it's borrowed, and it will pass, because the essence pass, because these things pass. Now, to observe something as part of the play of being a human being requires you to get up in the morning, prepare yourself, and observe. So in a way, it takes... The clock passes whilst you're watching the sun go down, if you're looking at the sunset. Agreed. That doesn't pull the rug from the fact that ultimately the whole lot is illusion, in my judgment. The whole lot is illusion.
In the sense that it's not the ultimate.
It's not the ultimate reality. It will pass. Look, put it like this. If it has causation, right? If it has form, and if it has time, a beginning and an end, then it can't be that which is the true essence. It's something other than the true essence. If it started, it will finish. If it has a form, that will change. And it just you have to look beyond it. You've got to look through that to look at something from which that came. That doesn't deny its validity. It doesn't deny its reality up to a point. But it isn't. The observation comes in that category. The gentleman is saying that the Big Bang is and the thing is progressing onwards and outwards all the time, which it is. That is all part of creation. Creation is part of the play. Creation and the play are not the ultimate reality. You can watch the creation. It will come to an end. It has form. It has causation. Sorry. Yes.
So I just thought of a good way to express the essence.
Go on.
I think.
Go on.
Well, with artificial intelligence,
yeah.
They think that eventually artificial intelligence and robots will be able to do absolutely everything that a human being can do. When we get to that point, then the difference between a human being and a robot will be essence. That's the only thing that the
I agree.
robot isn't going to have.
I agree. The only difference between a human being and a robot is the essence, the consciousness. And I think that is absolutely spot on. You can indeed get a robot to build motor cars, to do anything and everything.
Unless consciousness emerges when you get the right material thing together, in which case we're wrong and the materialists are right.
Well, who knows?
If consciousness emerges, but we'll never be able to tell.
Well, consciousness, as I understand it, is incapable of being defined. It's incapable of measurement. You have consciousness, I have consciousness. Where is you can't go to Tesco and get a pot of consciousness. It's not possible to in any way define it. If it were, then I'm sure you would be right. But you will not and cannot get a robot to write the preludes and fugues of Bach or the sonnets of Shakespeare or all the wonderful things we have in creation. They can, up to a point, create things, but not profound. We were looking. I happened to run a little group where we studied this stuff together, and we were looking yesterday at Hamlet. There is neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. The mind. So what is really important about this work is the mind. People say the sun always shines, but it's the clouds that cover it. But the sun always shines. So that's a nice thought to have that. But it's worthy, if we're philosophers, which we are sitting here, you wouldn't be sitting here if you weren't philosophers. If we are philosophers, we want to, what is the cloud? Answer, the cloud is the mind. I have likes, I have dislikes, I have fears, I have predispositions, I have all sorts of things going on in the mind. And they usurp the present moment, don't they? Am I the only one that happens to? I mean, they usurp the present moment. So the job is to refine that, to look at what's going on, If I'm not the mind, if it is a tool, let's use it. It's a fantastic tool. Let's use it. And that way, what happens is the love flows. Because ultimately the whole thing is about love. But it's blocked. The love is blocked by mental agitation. There's me and my world supersedes the love. Let's get rid of me and my world and get back to the love, which is non-judgmental. Mindfulness is about non-judgment. When there's love, there isn't judgment. There's acceptance, there's observation, but there isn't judgment. Why should we assume that it's real? I think it's a good question, and I'm going to approach it from a slightly different perspective. What I think you're saying is that why should we assume that there is an essence? Because there may not be an essence. It could be just a computer is as good an essence as anything else. Here's an answer for you. Suppose I believe in, let's call it God, and you don't. I cannot prove to you that there is a God. You cannot prove to me that there is not a God. So we have an impasse. All right? Where do we go with that? Answer, should you wish to, you can prove to yourself that there is a divine essence. It is quite simple to do. And it's really about falling completely still and allowing the thoughts of the mind to subside, allowing the emotions to die down, and just becoming very, very deeply still. And you might want to ask yourself, what's that all about? In fact, I think we'll try that now. Let's just do that together. So what I'm going to invite you to do, why don't you close your eyes like that? Just for a moment. Just let this talk subside. Let your thoughts about this talk subside. Let all of your world just subside. And just look at the body. Be aware of the body sitting on that chair. Try to relieve any tensions. And now you've got these senses. The touch. Be in touch now. Feeling. Scent. And listening. Just engage with the fact that there are sounds. There are some sounds in this room. And now widen the attention to include sounds outside. And now, beyond the sounds outside, go to the furthest sound you can consider. And even beyond the furthest sound lies a great silence, out of which all the sounds emanate. Just stay there for a moment. That silence is very deep. It's very profound. And it is nothing other than your very self. So just stay there for a minute now. Good.